Please excuse me for reading off this paper. I am 122 years old with PTSD. Salutations. My name is Jose Ramirez, and I am here today to discuss my World War I experiences. I got married when I was 18 to Mary Ann Anderson, which was her maiden name at the time. She got pregnant at 17, but we had to keep the child. On my 21st birthday, I was involuntarily drafted into the World War I. Supporting the U.S., I had to leave my child and my wife behind. I believe that was the year 1917, on May 3rd. We set out on June 5th, 1917, and we were headed for the French port Saint-Nazaire. Our form of transportation was a ship. This was a small ship that was crowded and uncomfortable. I got to come up on the deck usually once a day, twice a day if I was lucky. The purpose of this was for our crew to exercise our practice lifeboat drills. Many of the men that were on the ship had not been on water. Many became seasick. This resulted in numerous casualties. I never developed a seasickness, for my father used to take me on the water when I was a boy. In efforts to avoid being targeted by German submarines, our convoys tended to zigzag our ship movements. Because of our strategic movements, very few of our ships were sunken. Despite our training being extremely realistic, nothing could have properly prepared us for the intensity the Western Front would endure. When we arrived at the Western Front, we stayed in trenches with even more harsh conditions than the ship. The trenches ran in a 400-mile line through France and Belgium, from the North Sea in the Alps to the Alps. The trenches were 8 feet deep and 4 feet wide. After a little over a year fighting, on November 11th at 11 a.m., Germany had formally surrendered, and all nations had agreed to stop fighting while the terms of peace were negotiated. Later years after the war, the Americans were certain that their economy would continue to prosper, hence the booming stock market. The total cost of the war was $388 billion. Throughout all the nations in which the war left every major European country in near bankruptcy. My country had to support Britain, France, and Russia during their economic losses. When I returned home from the war, I was devastated to see that not only was my home destroyed, but my wife and kid had boarded the British passenger ship known as the Tahtiana. Shortly after the European decline, a prohibition law was set out. This law put strict laws on alcohol, banning the usage. The law was later repealed due to a rise in domestic violence. The 1920s was also the era where flappers became apparent. Years after this, I settled back in the U.S. Years went on as I mourned my family's passing. About 15 years after the existing war, I found a new partner that I had to keep secret. My partner was a man named Francis Anthony. When I turned 60, Francis and I got illegally married. It was not until I was 119 in 2015 where we would formally get married.
Surrender. Bye-bye to you, Academy.
Visual representation of Germany against other nations.
She got pregnant at 17, but we had to keep the child. On my 21st birthday, I was involuntarily drafted into the World War I. Supporting the U.S., I had to leave my child and my wife behind. I believe that when the year was... Why are you laughing?
No, you laugh first.
No, I